Why should it happen when you go to university? Is you should learn how to think and formulate arguments. You should learn to think, speak, and write. That's what the humanities are for. They are to make you dangerous, right? Because if you can think and speak and write, you're deadly in a complex job. You're exactly what's necessary. There is nothing you can possibly do to become more deadly than to improve your facility with language. And the way you do that is by reading especially great things, and by writing, and by thinking, and by speaking, for that matter. But how could that not be viewed as absolutely central to what education is about? You want to be inarticulate and stumble over everything that you try and think and communicate. How are you going to get anywhere? You don't even know who you are under these circumstances. You have the massive feeling that's expressing itself, maybe in violence because you cannot find the word. You stumble around and bump into things. You're clunky and dull, and you're not witty. You didn't sparkle. So let's say you take the example of a seal who's got it all, but this literacy, what happened to him compared to one who has all those skills? The truth of the matter is that you have all the potential as a child, but none of that is capable of manifesting itself freedom before you become disciplined. And discipline is a matter of the impositioning of the order, and the order is necessary, especially for people who are hopeless and nihilistic. And what does it mean? Well, it doesn't mean, geez, I had getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning and get ready to work. That just means you're not very disciplined. Or maybe that might mean something deeper. But I'd started with lack discipline before, in rearranging your whole life, because you might say, well, I hate getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning no matter what I'm doing. And then it's your job. I don't mean to not do difficult things. I mean, watch yourself. And if you see that you're doing things that make you hate yourself, then consider the cost of continuing. If something valuable, you will make a sacrifice to attain it. The discovery of sacrifice. I think that what separates human in one is primary factors separating human being from animal, because we discovered that we could let go for something we value in present, and we would gain something we value even more in the future. Lay a disciplinary structure on yourself, get the chaos in check, and then you can move toward a state that are freer, because it's discipline first. Like, look, if you're going to become a concert pianist, there is going to be several thousands of hours extraordinary disciplined practices. That's the imposition of order on your potential, let's say. But what comes out of that is much grander freedom. And so virtually every freedom that you have in life is that true freedom is purchased at the price of discipline. That's not some casual self-help doctrine. Is that if you do not organize yourself properly, you will pay for it in a big way. So, well, the people around you, and I would say start where you can start. If something announces itself to you as in need of repair that you could repair, then hey, fix it. You fix 100 things like that, your life will be a lot different. Now, I often tell people too, fix the thing you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial. You get up, you brush your teeth, and you have your breakfast, and you have your routine that you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life, and people think, well, they're mundane, I do not pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly the things you do every day. Those are the most important things you do, hands down. Well, there isn't anything better to have than a problem that's worth solving, that's really worth solving. The more of that you take on, the more you have reason to get out of the bed in the morning, no matter what. I'm getting up, I'm trudging forward. It doesn't matter what I'm suffering from. I've got things that need to be done, they're necessary, and that gives you the sense of purpose, and it's the antidote to bitterness. So yeah, there is lots of reasons too, because I've thought for a long time. Imagine you have a choice in front of you, because you do. So here is the choice. Your life is either meaningful or meaningless. So let's go through the meaningless part. It's your first, because you think, well, of course I don't want it to be meaningless. It's like, yeah, you hold on a second, nothing you do mattered, and so impulsive pleasure is the order of the day. No responsibility. You can do whatever you want. It's like Pleasure Island in the Pinocchio. It's like Neverland in Peter Pan. You're still a kid, you can play all the time, positive pleasure and no responsibility. That's reward for meaningless. And then the other side is, okay, well, let's say you want your life to be meaningful. It's okay. Then what do you matter? It actually matters. Make mistakes hurts you, hurts your family, hurts the world in a deeper way than you think. And you have to awaken to that, and then you have to take it on yourself. So you're at a particular stage right now, and the stage would involve particular worldview and behavior that go along with that. So the perception and behavior, but it's not enough because you haven't mastered the whole world and you're making mistakes all the time. And then there are other neurological mechanisms. So maybe that's more left hemisphere phenomenon, the institution of the identity. Then there is a right hemisphere mechanisms that are tracking your errors and keeping track of them. And errors are an indication that your theory is incomplete. So the errors accumulate and information around the errors accumulates. And another identity starts to become formulated. And it solves all the problem your previous identity did. But also some additional ones. When you have an aha moment like that, it's manifestation of the next identity that's making itself known, because it's being built from the bottom up. It isn't explicit yet. They'll encounter an explicit statement. You mention a couple here and they map into that, and that's the aha. It's like, yes. That's what ties together the things that I've been wrestling with in the back of my mind. Attention, for example, is mediated by unconscious forces. And you know that perfectly well. If you're sitting down to study, for example, your conscious intent is to study, but you know perfectly well that all sort of distraction fantasies are going to enter the theater of your imagination non-stop and annoyingly, and there isn't really a lot you can do about it except maybe wait it out. So you will be sitting there reading and your attention will flicker away. You'll think about it, I don't know, maybe you want to watch Jane a Virgin on Netflix or something like that, or maybe it's time you have peanut butter sandwich and you should get the dust bunnies from underneath of the bed, or it's time to go outside and have a cigarette, or maybe it's time for a cup of coffee, or it's like these subsystems in you that you would like something aren't very happy just to sit there and while you read the things that you're actually bored by, and so they pop up and try to take control of your perception and your action non-stop. Maybe you think, well, there is a stupid course anyway. Why do I have to read this damn paper? And what I'm doing in the university? And what's the point of life? It's like, well, you can really get going if you're trying to avoid doing your homework. And then you might think, well, what is it in that trying to avoid? Because after all, you took the damn course and you told yourself to sit down. Why didn't you listen? Well, because you're missed. That's basically why you haven't got control over yourself at all. I don't know how to start improving my life, someone might say that. And I would say, well, you're not aiming low enough. Regulate your habit. Try to get up at approximately the same time each morning. I would recommend that you get up approximately when other people get up. So that would be something in neighborhood of 7:30 or 8 in the morning. And perhaps earlier, perhaps a little bit later. But you want to stabilize that, becoming your circadian rhythms operate more. What would you call it? Fluidity, or your mood is likely to be regulated better if there is an island of stability in your daily routines. Human being is like daily routines, just like diets, like daily routines, and so regulate your sleep. I would say when you get up in the morning, eat breakfast. That's really important things to do. I can tell you how many people I've treated in my clinical practice whose proclivity for emotional instability or depression, anxiety, general hopelessness, emotional pain, and gloom and doom, as well as capacity to concentrate, were properly regulated or inhibited or reduced by merely ensuring that they ate, I would say, a protein and fat-rich breakfast relatively soon after they wake up. And that's especially true if you're stressed. And it turns out that if you stress yourself after a fast, which is of course what we've undertaken if you haven't eaten since the night before. That your body produces enough insulin to deplete the sugar in your blood, and then it's very difficult for you to become regulated properly with regard to your metabolism under the sleep again. And so it can be regulating your sleep and your breakfast. Eating habits in particular can be very effective way of regulating your mood and increasing your capacity to concentrate. The other things I would say is that scheduling your time is also extraordinarily useful. And so I can tell you a little bit about how to use schedules effectively. You should develop a long-term plan. You have to set up your long-term vision, and then I would say once you set up that vision so that you know how to orient yourself, and then you should start designing your days. And you can do that very effectively with calendar like Google Calendar. Many people say, well, I hate using schedule and hate using calendar. What you're doing is using the calendar as an external tyrant that is telling you what you should do if you were going to be conventionally good person each day. So you lock yourself up with arbitrarily responsibility, but that's not really how you should use a schedule. What you should use a schedule to do is to design that day that you would most like to have, and obviously that's going to include accepting some responsibility and undertaking to make progress on those things that you have to make progress on to keep your life more collapsing into chaos. But it should also mean that you schedule in activities and make you actually want to have that day. And so if you're using a schedule properly, then it can be your friend, and then can also be something that can increase your capacity to concentrate. And then I would say, well, if you're very scattered, and you can start with a trait yourself. You might say, well, I need to learn to read without distractions. So maybe what you do, you say, okay, well, for the next week, I'm going to read 10 minutes a day, and I'm going to try to limit the distractions. And if you're successful at that, then you could try 12 minutes a day. And if you're successful at that, you could try 15 minutes a day. And trick is to set a goal for yourself that's slightly beyond your current level of performance, enough to be challenging, enough to be worthwhile if you accomplish, but not so difficult that's the habits that you want to inculcate, and assume that it'll take you a number of months or even a number of years in order to become very fluent at the habit. The important things is that to start improving incrementally, because incremental improvement pays off like compound interest. There is always people out there who are doing far better than you on pretty much anything you want to imagine. If all you're doing is setting yourself in the reflected light, let's say, then it's gonna be pretty damn dismal. It's not good comparison, because, well, first of all, there is danger in just comparing yourself to others, period. Because they're not you. God only knows what struggles they had to undertake to get to where they were, and what burdens they were currently carrying that you're not aware of. But you can certainly contrast yourself with yourself, and that's a lot better. It's only way, well, it's also the only way of really measuring anything, approximating proper improvement. You can actually tell when you're a little better than you were yesterday, and you can actually do that. There is another thing that's interesting about is that you can actually make yourself a little better in some way. Pretty much, well, I don't know if it's every moment, but you can certainly do it every day. Be careful who you share good news with, because you want to share good news with people who are going to be genuinely happy for you. And be careful who you share bad news with, because that's equally tricky. You want someone who will listen to you when you're having trouble and allow you your grief. Beauty calls people with their high being, I would say, and to make friends with beauty is to introduce yourself very carefully to the mysteries of life that make us worth living. There has never been a better time for the majority of people to be alive and the future. Although we're vulnerable and terrible things can always happen to us, it's hard to make case that the future doesn't work comparatively be positive. We're becoming extremely technologically sophisticated, and the world is changing at incredibly rapid speed and rate. And the only way we're going to be able to manage that in a positive way is if each of us, or many of us as possible, are capable of making wise and careful and truthful decisions. And if you do that, then maybe things can continue to improve. You do not get people to stand up on their own 2 feet and to adopt responsibility if everything is given to them, and that's a real conundrum. The possibility that you can make yourself slightly better on the continual basis is, I think, that's something that's essential to anyone. I think that's equivalent to leading a virtuous life. And there is something to be said for virtue and truth. And that's one thing. Another thing that I've noticed about people who have been phenomenally successful in that way, really do everything they can to live in a truthful life, and you can get a bloody flying way to being honest. You got to know that there are differences in intelligence. It's really important. If you go into a job and you're not smart enough for that job, you're gonna have one bloody miserable time. You are going to make life wretched for the people around you because you won't be able to handle the position. But what do you really want to do? As far as I can tell, if you want to maximize your chances for both success and, let's say, well-being, is you want to find a startup occupation in which you would have an intelligence that would put you in the upper quartile. That's perfect. Then you're a big fish in a small pond, and you don't want to be a stupidest guy in the room. It's bloody rough place to be, and you probably don't want to be this smartest guy in the room earlier either, because what it probably means is that you should be in a different room if you want to be the best. What are you doing, bar none? Then having an IQ above 145 is a necessity, and maybe you're pushing 160 in some situation, and maybe that's making you 1% in 10,000 or 1% in 100,000. That's also a really good person at it. You probably have to be reasonably stress tolerant and also somehow conscientious. Why is that? Smart people are the top of dominance hierarchies, and the answer is that is a part because you get there first. I mean, everything's raised, roughly speaking, and the faster you are, the more likely you are to be at the forefront of the back. And intelligence, in large part, is speed. Faster people are going to get there first. You're gonna have to put some effort into your life, and you need to be motivated to do that. And so, what are your potential source of motivation? You could think about them in a big 5 manner. If you're extroverted, if you want friends, if you're agreeable, you want an intimate relationship. If you're disagreeable, you want to win competitions. If you're open, you want to engage in creative activity. If you're high narcissism, you want security. Okay, so those are all sources of potential motivation that you could draw on, that you could trail your own personally. And then there are dimensions that are want to consider your life axis. So we ask people about, well, if you could have your life the way you wanted in 3 or 5 years, if you were taking care of yourself properly, what would you want from your friendship? What would you want from your intimate relationship? How would you like to structure your family? What do you want for your career? How are you going to use your time outside of your job? Most creative people fail at producing their creative products and monetizing it. So your default position, if you're creative person, if you're gonna fail, and that's because it's hard to come up with something new, and it's hard to present it in the market at the right time, and it's hard to market it. The things are really difficult. And so what successful entrepreneurs do is they just keep doing it over and over and over and over. In some sense, you're creating all things like enterprises that are alive. They're run by people after all. Even if your idea is good, that doesn't mean it'll be successful. There is many things that you have to be taken into account. That's partially why persistence and the part of conscientiousness is so useful. It's like, why do you say it? If at first you fail, then try again. That would probably mean try something different rather than something old one. But persistent is hopeful because it enables you to run many experiments, and you need to know that the baseline is failure. It's important because there are probably some things that you could improve about yourself, and it's very difficult to go from 0 to 1 if you're starting out as a salesperson. For example, the hardest sales in the first customer, and they get easier with each additional customer.